Okay.
ECB members keep on saying they are ready to act and adopt quantitative easing if necessary. The problem is that while markets think it is already necessary, many of these members do not think the same. The question is, the quantitative easing is or not necessary, and if it is already, why are they postponing its adoption?
I think the reason they're postponing its adoption is more political than economic. At the moment, we're still awaiting the European Court of Justice decision on the legality of the OMT program, and that's due out on Wednesday this week. Now, I think the European Court of Justice will issue guidelines with respect to the form any form of quantitative easing program could take. Now, that's one of the reasons I think why there's a delay, because I think Mr. Draghi wants to try and get as much consensus as he can for some form of action at next week's meeting. Now, we've already been briefed with some leaks about some possible action about 500 billion euros of sovereign AAA bond buying at the meeting, but there's also another factor that could be causing them to delay, and that's the concerns about the Greece election. That being said, is quantitative easing necessary? Potentially, I think that it could well be, certainly if you look at the headline rate of inflation, which is negative. However, core prices are still above zero. They're at 0.8%. They're 1% above the headline rate. And I think it's very, very difficult to make an argument for 500 billion euros for quantitative easing, because essentially I don't think it will be anywhere near enough, and it's certainly not going to incentivize banks in Europe to actually lend money. And I think that, more than anything, is the biggest problem. The biggest problem isn't the fact that energy prices are falling, because in essence I think that's a good thing, because it should trickle down into lower energy bills for consumers. The biggest problem at the moment is there's a lack of a political will amongst the northern members of the ECB to actually allow the slippery slope to quantitative easing. What could it mean for the reform programs within the weaker countries of the euro area?
Can you give a percentage estimate if we would see the quantitative easing in the next meeting?
I think, to be honest, I think it's 50-50. It could go either way.
Okay.
I certainly do not think we will get quantitative easing. We may get an announcement.
Okay. Second question, some analysts forecast the euro-dollar at parity level. Can we judge this scenario realistic, and in case, would we see parity in the first or in the second half of 2015?
I don't think we will see parity in the first half or the second half of 2015. That presupposes presupposes two things. It presupposes that the ECB is able to embark on a large-scale easing program. That's by no means certain. And it also presupposes that we get a US rate hike. Again, I don't think that is any way certain either, because if you actually look at the inflation expectations for throughout the globe, we're getting falling prices in China, we're getting falling prices in Europe, we're getting falling prices here in the UK, and it's unrealistic to assume that we won't get falling prices in the US. Now, the US has an inflation mandate as well, and I think if the deflationary forces that are currently at play in China, Japan, Europe, and the UK spread to the US, we won't see a US rate hike this year either.
Okay. And in the next year, maybe?
Possibly within the next, probably 2016. I think probably we could see potential for a rate hike, but given the way prices are moving at the moment, I think it would be very surprising if we saw a rate hike out of the US this year.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Yuson.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Cheers, Alessandro. Bye-bye.